afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the 6th episode of Red Barn Samplers. My name is Ray Niles, and I'm the designer and reproductionist behind Red Barn Samplers. We have a lot of things we're going to talk about today, so grab a cuppa. We're going to talk about some antique samplers I have. We're going to talk about a new release coming right after the first of the year. We'll talk about one that will be available to everyone after the first of the year. And we will also be talking about some of the resources I found online and also maybe some future plans as well. So settle in, grab your favorite beverage, and let's begin. So first and foremost, I want to thank the people that have been supporting me throughout all of this great adventure. A couple people in particular. I've got Kim Goldman, who's now the Contented Needleworker on Instagram, and she just finished one of my samplers called W. Wallace, and she did a lovely job choosing her colors, and I love that she didn't stitch all of it. It reminds me that as stitchers, we can pick and choose what we want to stitch when we want to stitch, and I loved that she was able to customize that exactly for what she wanted. The other person I want to shout out is Anna Williamson. Anna has also finished one of my samplers, and it's the free one. If you haven't found it on my website, it's called Oak Bank School when it's stitched, but it was actually stitched by a young girl named Jemima Fortune Cunningham Smith. And there was a card that was found in the back of the frame when I took it apart, written by her daughter Agnes, that revealed that Jemima had stitched this when she was 10 years old in Glasgow in Oak Bank School. I've made it available to anyone who wants it. All you have to do is check out redbarnsamplers.com, click on the actual chart, and you'll be able to download it for free. I've seen a lot of people that have customized it. Denise Dubois actually added O Come, O Come Emmanuel at the top of it and made it look more Christmassy, and it is absolutely beautiful. Again, if you haven't checked it out, I would encourage you to do so. And then I also want to call out a gal that I ran into at my local needlework shop. So as many of you know, my local needlework shop is Heart's Desire in Wichita, Kansas. And I was in there one day picking up a couple models, and this woman goes, "I know you." And I said, "Oh?" And she said, "You're that girl." And I said, "What girl is that?" And anyway, a lovely, lovely fellow stitcher named Dorothy. And we had just had the best visit and just had the best time connecting over our love of stitching. And it was super fun to just find another individual who had that passion and that desire to stitch reproduction samplers as well. So Dorothy, great to visit with you. I look forward to many more encounters as well. I also want to remind everyone that about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I shared that when we hit 4,000 subscribers, that I would be giving away 2 Whitney sampler books. Whitney Antique books. And if you haven't checked out Whitney Antiques, I would encourage you to do so. They have some of the finest collection of any antique samplers I've ever seen and are so gracious in posting the images that they have for sale on their website. And again, it's Whitney Antiques. If you haven't found them, you need to add them. They also have produced several books that relate to their exhibits. This one, I shared a whole bunch on my last Flosstube, but this one in particular, I had 2 copies of. It's called Whitney Antiques, Samplers and Historic Embroideries. And then I also had a duplicate of this one, and it's called Stitched in Adversity, Samplers of the Poor. And both of these I am making available as prizes, I guess, when we hit 4,000 subscribers. So if you're watching and you haven't subscribed, please make sure you subscribe so that you get updates whenever I have announcements, and it also gets you in that drawing. I think we're just a little under 3,000, so if we could add another 1,000, then I'll be able to send these out. And again, I'll ship anywhere in the world, so if you are in another country and you'd like to win these, please, please, please hit subscribe, and I'll get those mailed to you if you happen to be the lucky winner. So you have to be over 18 and you have to be subscribed to my channel to win. The keyword is Whitney, and it's W-I-T-N-E-Y. There's no H in Whitney, so W-I-T-N-E-Y. So if you'd like to be entered in that drawing, please go ahead and submit your comment. And when we hit 4,000, I'll be drawing for a winner, 2 winners actually, 2 winners. So If you haven't done that, please make sure that you do that. I also wanted to share a shout out to Needlework Retailer. They've done a great job of promoting some of my samplers, and most recently had a post on Instagram promoting one of my samplers that had the word gratitude at the bottom. It was a sampler stitched by Betty Sumner, and just a lovely reminder that as the season unfolds for all of us, that gratitude is something that we can all look forward to and sharing with others, and it costs us nothing. So again, thank you, Needlework Retailer, for doing that as well. And then Needlework Retailer will also be featuring 3 of my new samplers that will be released, I believe January 1 is when they will come out of Needlework Retailer. So I'm going to give you a little sneak peek of one of them, because I will be doing another Flosstube probably right after Christmas, right before the holiday. And the one I want to show you, the reason it drew me, a couple reasons, is this little sampler here, and I've got it against a piece of wood so you can kind of see it. And the reason I put it against a piece of wood is that it's framed between 2 pieces of glass. So I want to tell you a little bit about this sampler. First off, we got a little bit of a glare there. Let me adjust that. First off, I was immediately drawn to this sampler for a couple reasons. Number one, I love red, white, and blue. I love that whole patriot thing. I love the patriotic stitching. I love the idea that I'm proud to be an American, right? And so I'm drawn to samplers, whether they're American or not, that express kind of that red, white, and blue theme. And what I loved about G. Hubbard, Trinity School, 1889, was it was really just done with 3 colors: red, blue, and kind of a light tan. So it would look great in a red, white, and blue Americana patriotic collection. The other thing that drew me to this is, I'm going to move this in here a little closer for you so you can kind of see, like, her W right here has 2 colors in it. She's got multiple colors, combinations of that red, blue, and tan. But when I turn this over, I want you to look closely at this. Look at the back stitching on this. Unbelievable. Like, I could hang this in my house backwards and it would look perfectly fine. I was just blown away by what I could find in the fineness of the stitching. So I started looking to see if I could find who G. Hubbard was. And I want to tell you a little story about my detective work. So at first I thought, well, maybe it's not G. Hubbard, okay? You know how your brain works. I thought, well, maybe it's G.H., right? G.H. And this is Ubba Road, right? I thought G.H., Ubba Road, and Trinity School. I thought, well, let's see if there's a Trinity School on Ubba Road anywhere in the world. There isn't. So I thought, okay, it can't be G.H. It has to be G. Hubbard, and it has to be Trinity School. So I sent off, and I'm not exaggerating, probably 19 emails to 19 different schools that were called Trinity School in the United Kingdom, Scotland, Wales, England, Ireland, thinking, okay, maybe I'll find a Trinity School that has lineage back to the 1880s. No luck. So then I thought, okay, I need to reach out to the individual that sold me this sampler and just see if that person maybe has a little information on that sampler. I lucked out. So the irony here is that when I reached out to the person who had sold me this, he said to me that he had known the nephew of the lady who had lived in the house in Whitstable, Kent, England, and that she had lived there her entire life, and that the relative had given the sampler to the seller along with a few of the woman's other things, including this sampler with these other items that they had, and that he had kept it for over 40 years. Okay, so now I had more clues. I knew that G. Hubbard had lived in Whitstable, Kent, England. I knew that she had lived in this house for 40 plus years. I knew that her name was G. Hubbard, so I asked the individual, I said, so what was the name of the nephew? And he told me the name of the nephew, which then more backwards backtracking, I was able to find that this sampler, this beautiful little sampler, was stitched by none other than Grace Ellen Hubbard. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Grace Ellen. So Grace was born in 1878 in Somerset, England, and her father was 25 years old, and her mother was 24. And she was the second of 5 children. And at the time of the 81 census, it shows that her father was listed as a grocery assistant. I thought that was an unusual job, but a grocery assistant. They were married June 4th. Her parents were married June 4th, 1876, and their first child, Henry, was born 5 months later. Grace was born 2 years later, and then she had a sister named Alice, and then another sister named Flora. And then 5 years after Flora's birth was a brother named Sidney. Now, why is it important that you know the names of the brothers or even the sisters? But the reason the brothers are important is that I knew that the nephew had to have the last name of Hubbard as well. So I knew that I had to be either looking for Sidney or I had to be looking for Henry, okay? So what I found was that Grace stitched the sampler when she was 11 years old while she attended the Holy Trinity School in Whitstable. And the stitching on the back mirrors the front intricately, and that Grace's nephew, the child of her brother Sidney, was the owner of the sampler before it was given to the individual that Red Barn Samplers purchased it from. I also was able to discern that in 1901, Grace lived in Whitstable, where she had been born, and her father was still a grocery assistant, but her brother was employed as a port stationer's boy. And again, I live in Kansas, guys. I have no idea what a port stationer's boy is. Little further research around the area and found that Whitstable is famous for native oysters, which were collected from the beds out in the low water from the tide, and that it was probable that her brother worked in the harbor. Okay, well, that all kind of made sense. I also found that Grace was single. In fact, she never married. When she was 32 years old, she was working as a servant for Mrs. Catt, C-A-T-T, who was an elderly woman of 90, and her daughter named Mary, who was 57. Also was able to discern that at the age of 86, having never married, having had no children, Grace Ellen passed away in 1965. So she died in my lifetime, right? You're doing the math. How old is Ray? Well, I was born in 63. So I was 2 years old when this woman died. And I now have her sampler. And the beauty of this is if you're looking for a January start, if you're looking for something to begin your year, if you're looking for something to add to your Americana collection or your patriotic collection, I would encourage you to pick up G. Hubbard, 1889, which will be available from local needlework shops as well as online at redbarnsamplers.com on January 1. I also want to put a little plug in for those of you that may have stitched W. Wallace. Let me pull her up. This is the original. W. Wallace, 1878. If you happen to stitch W. Wallace, the gum nut threads that you used for the red and the blue will work just fine. And depending upon the tan color that you picked, you can probably use the tan. And on the chart, I've put colors for DMC, SWA 103, and for the gum nut silk. So if you're looking for a partner to hang on the wall, let me just show you what these two look like. I think it's a fantastic solution if you're wanting to add to your Americana patriotic collection. So this is the original W. Wallace. I'll be returning the original to my home and then to my local needlework shop the middle of January. W. Wallace was an exclusive out at the attic. Jean and her team have been taking care of W. Wallace for probably about 7 months, and I'm moving it back to the Midwest to take care of in my local needlework shop. So again, W. Wallace will be available January 1 as well, as will G. Hubbard, and then 2 others, which I'll be sharing with you at a later time as well. So those are kind of my new ones coming out, or one of the new ones coming out. And then just as a reminder, this is what the W. Wallace chart looks like, and that's what the model looks like. So rich, vibrant colors for you to add to your own collection. And then the story of W. Wallace is in here as well. Couple other things I want to share with you today. I belong to a couple Facebook groups that have some of the most amazing women in them. Oh, actually, probably men too. They're stitchers, but amazing needleworkers. And here about 3 weeks ago, one of the posts from the gal that runs the group was the 12 Days of Christmas? Did we have any samplers that had the 12 Days of Christmas? So I happen to have a sampler in my collection, believe it or not, that is from 1705. That's older than the United States of America. 1705, and it's about 4 feet tall. So I'm going to grab it and show it to you. And this sampler is not only huge, but I've since learned several things about it. I originally thought it was stitched by multiple girls because as you look at the sampler, depending upon the orientation, it has images there. The stitching goes one way or the other way. I have since learned that this possibly was stitched by one girl, and it was stitched in something called the round. I don't know an awful lot about the round. I've just recently learned of it. But what I do know about this sampler is that the work in it, the workmanship, is unbelievable. And the colors are so very vibrant. When I acquired this, it was already framed. I have not taken it out of the frame. I really didn't think I was going to reproduce it. I only posted it on the Facebook group because I love that it had multiple pairs. You know, a partridge in a pear tree. I don't think that's a partridge, I think that's a parrot. But you can see there's all kinds of beautiful little motifs. We have a peacock here. Let's turn it this way. Turn it upside down here. There's a peacock on the end that I think is quite lovely. You can kind of see the peacock if I move this up. See the peacock down there, and it looks like a sheep, kind of a zodiac symbol. But each one of these could be their own sampler. And so I have rethought whether or not I will actually chart it or if I will just chart parts of it. I'm still continuing to do some research on it. There is wording on here. I believe it to be German, Saxon, from 1705. I don't speak German. I have a lady who has graciously offered to help me figure out what all it means. But I think it says Son of God, honestly. I'll just kind of bring this across so that you can kind of see the words down there. And if you happen to know what that says, freeze your camera, freeze the video. And if you know, please let me know, because I really have no clue what it says. I do believe CVL, kind of right here in the middle, this CVL, which is right here. I think that's the initials of the girl who stitched it. I'm not sure what the words are above it. But again, if you happen to know, please let me know. The colors are unbelievable. And like I said, I posted it in a Facebook group because we were looking at the 12 Days of Christmas. And that's the only reason I posted it. But since then, I've had quite a bit of interest in it. And it's probably one of the finest ones I have in my collection. I feel very grateful to own it. And if anyone has additional information they wish to share with me about it, that would be fantastic. I also posted in that same Facebook group, again, the people in that group are amazing. Their stitching is beautiful. The challenge this week was a Christmas ornament. Now, I don't really have Christmas ornaments that are stitched. I was a teacher for many years, and so I do have some from my students, but none that I have stitched. And the ones from my students are mainly crocheted ones or ones with little beads or baubles on them. But what I do have is, again, a sampler that I acquired from the same individual that I acquired that one from. And it's Eliza Ann Jordan, 1844. And what makes Eliza so unusual is how she dated her sampler. She dated it Xmas 1844. Xmas 1844. I also love the prayer. Many of us have seen this in other stitching. It says, a prayer to the blessed Savior. Jesus, permit thy gracious name to stand as the first effort of an infant's hand. And while her fingers on the canvas move, engage her tender heart to seek thy love. With thy dear children, let her share a part and write thy saving name upon her heart. Savior divine, incline thy ear, propitious to this humble prayer. Eliza Ann Jordan, Xmas, 1844. And a couple things to point out on this. I believe it's original frame. It's got extra tape on the back, that old brown tape, but if you look here, I believe it is the original. I believe this has probably been replaced with the extra hinging, a hook on it. But look at the fine stitching on this. Very, very, very fine stitches. Also the Old English, see the word blessed over here? The word blessed almost looks like B-L-E-F-S-E-D. Many times Old English, when two S's are together, the F, the symbol that looks like an F to our I, is used. I also love the birds. I think that bird is just divine. And I think this bird is amazing as well. I've not looked at it close enough to know if they're actually reverse of each other. And then I believe these down here are baskets of flowers. And they probably go more like this. They're baskets of flowers set at an angle. The stitching is unbelievable. Eliza, believe it or not, was 9 years old when she did this. And what I found about Eliza Ann was born in Birmingham, Warwickshire, England in 1835. She was 9 years old when she stitched this in 1844. And the irony of all of this is, as the daughter of Arthur and Mary in the 1851 census, when she would have been 15 and a half or probably 15 years old, instead of being listed as a scholar, which most other children of the time would have been listed, she is listed as a dressmaker. So already at the age of 15, she had skills that allowed her to have a profession. So no wonder when I looked at this and I saw all this fine, tiny, tiny stitching, it made sense that as a young girl, that she would then become a dressmaker. So I love this. I love the poem or the prayer. I love that she did it as Xmas. I also did a little research. I thought, well, when did we start using Xmas, right? Like, when did that come into play? Because I thought it was pretty modern. What I found was that Xmas was like 15th, 16th century. It was actually used to denote sometimes Christmas in the Catholic religion, and the X looked more like a cross or a crucifix. So that was news to me. I didn't know that. But I just think it's so unusual that instead of saying December or just doing the year, that she actually put Xmas. So again, I just think that it's a beautiful, beautiful sampler, and one that I'm very fortunate to have in my possession. Whether I get it reproduced in the very near future probably won't happen, but at some point I might, or at least elements of it. So I know there's been some interest in that based off of the posting that I did on Instagram. I have found, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit, I have found a couple free books. And I don't know about you guys, but I love looking at reference books for stitching. And part of the reason I love looking at them is it's kind of like, cookies in a cookie jar. You don't eat them all in one setting. You kind of go back to the cookie jar to get the cookie that you want. And so I was looking at a book called Drawing on America's Past. And what I found was that this Drawing on America's Past book, which is huge, it's a huge book. It has, 400 or 500 pages in it. It has 260 pages in it. Is that this book was put together to represent the folk art that was all across America. And there's actually a pretty good section in here on samplers and stitching and all kinds of folk art. So that put me down another rabbit hole to see if maybe that was available online for free, and it is. So I'm going to include the link. You can freeze the frame, write it down, and you'll be able to download this entire book for free for reading on your iPad or your Kindle at a later date, or on your computer at a later date. But the thing that drew my interest to it is that there is a sampler in here by a stitcher named Uri C. Fell. And in my research around Uri, I found out quite a bit about her because I have one of her samplers. And you'll be hearing more about Uri's sampler, and her name is U-R-E-E, Uri C. Fell. You'll be hearing more about her in future episodes, but I actually stumbled upon this book simply because I was trying to research her, because she is an American. She's an American stitcher, and the sampler I have is an American stitched sampler as well. So if you'd like to add this to your collection, the link is below. I would encourage you to do that as well. I also had been doing a little bit more research around a couple of the other samplers I have, because not only is it important to be accurate in the reproduction, and I try really hard to do that, it's also important for me to be accurate in the stories that I get to tell about those little girls, right? And I'm reminded that if you were a young girl living 200 years ago, and in some cases even 100 years ago, but 200, 300, 400 years ago, you didn't get to sign your name. Your daddy signed it for you, or your husband signed it for you. So finding anything with a girl's name on it is really hard. And to have the needlework that they've put their name on is really important. And so I really try and honor that by finding out more about their lives and who they were. And in doing that, I ran across a book called Preparing Girls for Life. And this is put out by the British School Museum. And it also is a free download. And it has many different anecdotal or stories about the girls and the samplers that they stitched and the elements that were included. So if you're looking to add a nice reference book at no cost to your own collection, besides the one I just shared with you, Drawing on America's Past, I would encourage you to download Preparing Girls for Life. And you'll notice the URL is below. Preparing Girls for Life, and it's put out by the British Schools Museum. Again, just a wonderful, wonderful resource, and it has some good eye candy in there as well. So if you're looking to enjoy some quiet time over the holidays, this might be the ticket for you. I also want to follow up on something that Nicola Parkman had shared in one of her recent Flosstube videos. And again, if you're not familiar with Nicola, oh my heavens, you are in for a treat. She's probably... well, when I grow up, I want to be like Nicola. Let's just say that. Nicola is an amazingly brilliant stitcher, a historian, and reproduction needleworker. And she had shared a couple episodes back about the Foundling Hospital in England. Now, as a girl growing up in the United States, I didn't know what the Foundling Museum was. So as soon as Nicola said that, I'm on my iPad and I'm looking up information about the Foundling Hospital. And what she went on to share was that they currently have some of the largest collection of textiles from about 1790 to about 1900 of anywhere in the world. And it's because when the young mothers gave their children up for adoption or assistance, they would take their child to the Foundling Hospital and they would leave a piece of fabric, and then the mother would keep the other half of the fabric, kind of like we would do with a matching ticket. And the Foundling Hospital, or the Foundling, it's now a museum, has all of these textiles that are categorized and organized by year and by the child. And I was so taken by that. I just was like, oh my heavens, to prove that this child was mine, all I had to do was produce the fabric that I had cut in half or that I had shared with the hospital when I left the child. And I thought, surely people did that. What I found was that the return rate wasn't all that high. They didn't get 100%. That when the mothers gave their children away, many of them didn't get to bring them home later. And so I became very intrigued about the Foundling Hospital and really appreciated that Nicola had brought that to my attention. In the meantime, have stumbled across not only the Haptic and Hue podcast, which I was listening to already, but Haptic and Hue has an episode where they talk about the Foundling Hospital, again, adding to that wealth of knowledge, which was amazing. And then just about 2 weeks ago, I stumbled onto a video series. It's a one-season series on Amazon Prime, and it's called A Stitch in Time. And in episode 3 of A Stitch in Time, the narrator takes us into the Foundling Museum, shows us these books that have all of these textiles on them. And for me, it was like it had come full circle. I knew what Nicola had told me. I had heard about it in Haptic and Hue. And then now in this video series, episode 3 of A Stitch in Time, I was able to learn more about what did those little textiles look like, what were the embellishments that were left, were they ribbon, were they satin, were they silk? Absolutely fascinating. So again, if you're intrigued by that as well, I would encourage you to take a look. So those were the things I've kind of been working on, looking at, enjoying over the last couple weeks. And then also, I had a couple people ask me, how do you chart? Like, how are you doing this charting thing? So I thought, well, I'll take a minute and show you how I chart. So probably my favorite tool for charting is my iPad mini and my Apple Pencil. And I use an app called Mobi Stitch, M-O-B-I, and then the word stitch, S-T-I-T-C-H. And what I do is, the first thing I'll do when I get a sampler is I'll hold it to the light, see if there's anything there that might intrigue me or that I don't see with the naked eye. And then a lot of times I'll lay it on a light table to actually chart it. If it's easy to see, I won't use the light table. But let me show you what Mobi Stitch looks like. And I'll actually put a little video in here. So here's Mobi Stitch. It's this little icon here. It looks like a bunch of yarn or fibers in a heart. And what I like about being able to to be able to chart using a pencil is that when I chart it, I'm right there with it. So my sampler's right beside me. I'm charting, I'm putting X's by filling in dots. And the other thing I really like about this is I'm not using my mouse and then looking up at a monitor. It's all very close. So there's an intimacy in being able to see exactly what I'm stitching or what I'm charting. When I get done with it being charted in Mobi Stitch on my iPad, I then take and connect my iPad to my MacBook, and then I drag the file from Mobi Stitch into Mac Stitch. And then I do fine tuning on Mac Stitch. I would say 90% of my charting for any chart is done on here, with about another 8 or 9% finished in Mac Stitch. And then I do my layouts in an application called Pages. And that maybe sounds like a lot to people, like those steps, like how does she do all that? I think some of you know this, but I did work for a technology company for 15 years, and I helped teachers connect the dots between learning and teaching and the devices. And so I could probably do this in my sleep. So it's not a big deal. If you are out there and you want to get started charting and you think you want to use Mobi Stitch, it is a free download. I'd be happy to help you get started. Private message me and I'll give you some tips on that as well. Now, the last thing I want to share with you is, I do like giving those tech tips. I feel like I have kind of a moral obligation to give tech tips. But the tech tip I want to give to you today maybe will help you during the holiday season. So I want to show you how you could take crazy Uncle Harry, or in this case, I'm going to use my husband as the example, out of one of your photos. So I pulled up a picture that we took about a year ago. We were at a wedding and the photographer was floating around and he said, "Hey, we're taking pictures." I said, "Well, could you take a picture of my husband with me?" This is what we actually used. Believe it or not, we've been married 40 years. Last year, this year it's 41 on Monday. On Monday, it'll be 41 years. So I thought, well, I'll use this picture as the example as if this was crazy Uncle Harry, but it's really not. So how would you remove an image of a person from one of your photos off of an iPhone? Now, I don't know how this works on an Android. Never used an Android, but I can tell you on an iPhone running the latest iOS, here's how you do it. If I tap and hold, did you see that happen? I'm going to do it one more time. So I'm going to tap and hold. Watch how that see how that ripples across? When it does, what it's doing is it's identifying the individual. So I'm going to say copy. And I'm actually going to just open up a note because I want to just show you how this works in just a note. So I'm going to open up a note and I have a blank canvas here. And if it says copy, I should be able to tap it and be able to say paste. And when I hit paste, it takes my husband and I and takes the background out. It just gives me my husband with me, no background. So maybe you have crazy Uncle Harry you want to remove. You can do that by simply just clicking on the individual and it'll remove it. So it's a press, which produces the copy. You could also share it. I could share that image, just the people in that image. But if you do that with multiple people, let's say you want to grab Aunt Susie and Uncle Harry and Cousin Bill, you could put all of them in one picture together if you work on it. But it's a great tip to be able to use your iPhone to just capture images without having to worry about the background. So again, let's say I just want us, but not in the car. Tap and hold, copy, go back to notes, tap one time, paste comes up. As soon as paste comes up, there we go, and it took out all the background. So if you're wanting to change the background, move that image to a different one, that's how you would do that using that copy paste. So again, thank you for joining me. A Merry Christmas, Happy Holiday, Happy Hanukkah, whatever holiday you celebrate during this blessed season. I hope it's the best one yet. And I will be back after Christmas and probably right around the first of the year. But in the meantime, thank you for all of your support over the last several months. I hope your family is well. And I hope that you are able to enjoy this blessed season with those that you love. So with that, may your floss never twist. Have a great evening, a great morning, or great afternoon. Thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.